What if Robert Baratheon betrothed Jon Snow to Daenerys Targaryen to end the Targaryen war forever? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The city is still bleeding. Ned Stark rides through the gates of King's Landing on a grey morning 3 weeks after the sack, and the wound is everywhere he looks. Charred beams lean against scorched stone. The streets near the dockside are darker than they should be, stained with things the morning rains have not washed away. Lannister banners hang from every tower alongside the crowned stag of House Baratheon, gold, lion, and black antler, sharing the same poles like an uneasy marriage. The small folk in the streets do not look at the banners. Nobody looks happy about any of it. Ned does not look happy either. He rides with 6 men at his back and a bundle held against his chest, wrapped in travel-stained wool. The bundle does not cry. In the weeks since the Tower of Joy, the baby has learned to be quiet when Ned tells him to be quiet. He has dark hair, faint and soft, and grey eyes that track movement the way a wolf pup's do. He has a name, Jon. That is all he is for now, and all he will ever be if Ned rides north without stopping. The problem is, Ned is not riding north, he is riding toward the Red Keep. The castle sits above the city like a crown on a dead king, its red stone towers still trailing a thin ghost of smoke from fires nobody has properly explained. Ned passes through the outer gates without challenge. Robert's men know his face. Inside the yard, a steward meets him and takes his horse. Ned keeps the baby. He asks for a private word with the king. The steward gives him a look, the kind that carries a warning about the king's mood since the rebellion ended. Ned says it again more quietly. No counsel, no hand. Just the two of them. The steward goes. Robert receives him in his solar, a room that still bears the previous king's taste in tapestries and the previous king's taste in everything else. Old Targaryen victories stitched in red and black hang along the walls. A window looks south toward the harbor. Robert stands at that window with his back to the door, a cup of wine already in his hand, and for a moment he looks nothing like the man Ned grew up beside in the Eyrie. He is 21 years old, and king of the 7 kingdoms, and he looks as if he has not slept since the Trident. I thought you'd be halfway to Winterfell by now, Robert says without turning. Ned closes the door. He crosses the room and sets the baby on the table between them. The baby makes a small sound, not quite a cry, and pushes one fist against the wool. Robert turns. He looks at the bundle for a long moment. Then he looks at Ned. Whose is that? Lyanna's. Ned does not look away. His father is Rhaegar Targaryen. The silence in the room is complete. Robert sets his cup down very slowly. When he raises his eyes again, they are not the eyes of someone receiving news. They are the eyes of someone who is deciding how much to destroy. Say that again. Rhaegar took Lyanna to the Tower of Joy. He did not abduct her. They were married in secret by a septon named Maynard before a heart tree in Dawn. The record exists in Maynard's journal at the Citadel. I was there when she gave birth. I held the boy when she died. Ned's voice does not shake. It is the voice of a man who has been practicing this, who has known this moment was coming from the hour he rode away from that tower with an infant and a secret that could start another war. His name is Aegon Targaryen by right of blood. He is Rhaegar's legitimate heir. His claim to the Iron Throne is stronger than Viserys, stronger than the girl Rhaella carries at Dragonstone. Robert crosses the room in 3 strides. He is staring at the baby the way a man stares at a flame before he decides whether to step into it. You brought me a Targaryen. You brought me the son of the man who took Lyanna from me. His voice drops to something very quiet, which on Robert is more frightening than shouting. Why is this child still breathing, Ned? Because killing him solves nothing. Ned steps between Robert and the table. He does not draw a weapon. He does not need to. They have known each other since they were boys of 8, and there are languages between them that do not require steel. Viserys is alive. He is 7 years old and sitting at Dragonstone with Rhaella right now, and when she delivers, there will be another Targaryen in the world. You can put this boy in the ground, and Viserys still stands. You can kill Viserys, and the girl Rhaella carries becomes the last of the line. There will always be a Targaryen left alive to serve as a rallying point, and you cannot kill every one of them without making martyrs of all of them. I can try, Robert says. You tried at the Trident. Ned holds his ground. You killed Rhaegar. The war went on another year. It always goes on. He looks at the infant on the table. He is 3 weeks old. He has dark hair and grey eyes, and he looks like Lyanna. The realm does not know what he is. Right now you are the only person outside of that tower who does. You can use that. The only way the Targaryen question closes forever is if the last legitimate heir stands beside House Baratheon, not against it. You control what he becomes. You control who he marries. You make the claims serve you. Instead of fighting you for the rest of your reign, Robert is quiet for a long time. It is not the quiet of a man who is listening. It is the quiet of a man who is already thinking. He is a king who married Cersei Lannister, not for love, but to put Lannister gold and swords behind his throne. He has always understood that the right arrangement is worth more than another battle. He stares at the child on the table, the small dark-haired boy who has no idea what he is. Then Robert reaches out and touches the baby's fist with one finger, the way you would test the temperature of something that might burn you. The fist opens slowly and closes around it. Robert lets out a breath. He does not say anything useful. He does not say anything at all. But he takes his hand back, and he does not reach for his sword. And that is the first time since Ned walked into this room that Ned allows himself to breathe. "Get out," Robert says. "Stay in the city. I need to think." Ned picks up the baby. He wraps the wool back around the small dark head and walks to the door. At the threshold, he pauses once and looks back. Robert has returned to the window, his back to the room, his wine untouched on the table. He is looking south toward the harbor, toward Dragonstone, somewhere beyond the grey horizon, and his face is unreadable. Outside in the corridor, Ned holds the boy against his chest and stands still for a moment. He has told Robert Baratheon the truth. He has set the stone rolling down the hill, and there is no way to call it back now. Whatever Robert decides, whatever order comes out of that solar in the hours ahead, Jon is no longer just Ned's to keep. Whatever the boy is about to become, it is already beginning. Ned carries him down the corridor, past the torches and the Lannister guardsmen and the black and red tapestries of a dynasty that just ended, and he does not look back again. The small council chamber sits at the heart of the Red Keep, like the room where decisions go to become real. It is a long rectangular space with a single window facing east and a table of dark polished wood scarred by decades of elbows and ink. Dragon skulls line the corridor outside, the skulls of dead kings, stacked against the walls where the living king can pass them every day on the way to deliberate. Robert passes them without looking. He has called the council for the hour after dawn. The city outside is barely awake. That is intentional. Jon Arryn, his hand of the king, is already seated when Robert enters, grey-haired and composed with the stillness of a man who has weathered more crises than most men survive. Ned Stark takes the chair across the table and says nothing. Varys arrives, as he always arrives, which is to say, nobody sees him enter, and suddenly he is simply present, soft-footed and clean-handed, with his fingers folded in his lap. Grand Maester Pycelle settles himself into the largest chair, with the slow care of a man in no hurry to hear anything. Ser Barristan Selmy stands at the door in his white cloak, because Barristan considers himself a guard first and a council member second, in that order always. Robert says, 4 days ago Eddard Stark told me something. You are going to hear it now. He does not look at Ned while he tells it. The story comes out in the order he has practiced it since the night Ned laid the infant on the table. Tower of Joy, Septon Maynard, Lyanna's death, the legitimate heir that nobody in this room knew existed. He watches Jon Arryn while he talks. The hand's face gives nothing away except the steady rotation of thought behind his eyes. The child is Rhaegar's by law, Robert says. His blood claim outranks Viserys. It outranks the girl Rhaella is carrying at Dragonstone. Here is what I mean to do. The boy is legitimized by royal decree. A raven goes to Dragonstone. The Targaryen children are brought to King's Landing under safe conduct, both of them alive and unhurt. When the girl is born, Jon is betrothed to her. The Targaryen line continues, but under my hand, no assassination, no new martyrs, no second war in a decade. Silence. Ser Barristan speaks first. He does not take a chair. He addresses the room from the door, which is how he always addresses rooms when he has something he will not walk back from. I find myself in agreement, Your Grace. His voice carries the weight of a man who has stood on more fields of honor than anyone else at this table. I have refused orders before. When they required killing children, there is no honor in it. An assassination is an act of fear. A betrothal is an act of governance. Whatever I may think of Rhaegar Targaryen, his children are innocent of his choices, and the honorable path is the one before us. Jon Arryn taps one finger on the table, a habit the people who know him have learned to read as assent. The realm has just survived a war. The last thing it needs in the next decade is the story of a murdered Targaryen child circulating in every tavern in the Seven Kingdoms. You cannot kill a martyr. You can only make more of them. He looks at Ned briefly, then back at Robert. Control is better than elimination. I support this. Pycelle draws a long breath and begins. The legal considerations, Your Grace, are not trivial. The annulment of Rhaegar Targaryen's marriage to the Lady Elia was performed without the sanction of the High Septon. The faith will have questions. The Lords of Dorne, who have just lost their princess to Lannister swords, will contest the legitimacy of this claim at every step. A bastard cannot be made lawful without a royal decree countersigned by the hand and reviewed by the High Septon. And the annulment itself, he pauses, as if the weight of the word is considerable, is legally contested ground. None of this is impossible to resolve, but it will require time and careful handling. Then, handle it carefully, Robert says. Pycelle nods in the way he has of nodding at everything the king says, as if each instruction were a piece of profound wisdom. Varys speaks quietly without inflection, as if he is simply narrating facts that happen to exist. If I may raise a practical concern, Sir William Darry at Dragonstone is a loyal man with children in his care, and a king's raven arriving in his garrison will not automatically read the word protection the way Your Grace intends it. The raven must carry the king's seal and the hand's countersignature. It must reach the garrison commander before Darry hears of it, and it must be worded in terms that leave no interpretation available. He pauses. The realm's interest is best served by those children arriving here alive. A loyal man with a sword and a week's warning is capable of complications. Word it plainly then, Jon Arryn says, safe conduct, royal protection, no harm to come to the children or their guardian. He sets his hands on the table. There is one more matter, Your Grace. Tywin Lannister. Robert's expression does not move. Say what you mean. He is at Casterly Rock. He will hear of this within a fortnight. He carried the Lannister armies to King's Landing at the cost of considerable treasure and considerable reputation. What he expected in return was that his grandchildren would one day sit the throne. A legitimized Targaryen heir standing ahead of those grandchildren is not the arrangement he made. Jon Arryn says all of this without judgment, the way a physician describes a wound. He will not oppose you openly. He will work against this through other means and through other people. You should know that before you send the Raven. The room is quiet for a moment. Robert has already thought about Tywin. What he has not said yet, has not said to anyone, is that he has also thought about Cersei. She is newly his wife, and she is not in this room, and she will hear everything that was said here before this day is out. He knows how Cersei thinks. He has known it since before the wedding. She married him, expecting her children to wear the crown someday, expecting the succession to flow from her, to her sons, to their sons in an unbroken line. She said nothing about this out loud, because she never says this kind of thing out loud. But a legitimized Targaryen heir, placed above anything she might produce, is an undoing of every calculation she has ever made about what this marriage is worth. She will not forgive it, and that is, Robert thinks, a problem that will not announce itself until it has already taken root. Let him work against it, Robert says, whether he means Tywin or the thought he has not shared. The matter is decided. Jon Arryn, start the legitimization process with the High Septon. Ned, you take the boy north. Keep him at Winterfell, away from this court, until the betrothal is formalized. I want him raised somewhere he can become something useful before the politics reach him. He looks around the table. The betrothal announcement goes out when the girl is born. Not before the realm hears it on my terms. The council rises. Wyas. In the corridor outside, Ned's steward brings him the infant in its bundle of wool. Ned takes the boy without a word and stands in the passage while the other men file past him. Jon Arryn gives him a long look on the way out. Not unkind, not quite reassuring either. Just the look of an old man who has seen the beginning of too many things and has learned not to predict where they end. Ned looks down at the dark-haired boy in his arms. The child is asleep and unconcerned. Somewhere beyond the narrow eastern window out past the harbor and the cold grey sea, a girl is about to be born who will one day be promised to this child's name. Neither of them knows yet what has been decided on their behalf. Either of them could object even if they did. Ned carries him out through the corridor of dead kings and into the light. The storm arrives at Dragonstone, the way all the great storms arrive, without warning and without mercy, sweeping in off the narrow sea in a wall of black water and screaming wind. By the time the midwives summon help for Queen Rhaella, the waves are already clawing at the lower stones of the castle, and what little remained of the Targaryen fleet has been scattered to wreckage across the bay. The masts are visible through the narrow windows when the lightning comes tilted and broken, going down. Inside the birthing room, the Queen has been laboring since morning. Sir Willem Darry waits in the corridor outside, and listens to everything he cannot change. He is an old knight in the service of a dead dynasty, and he has been planning for 3 days. He has picked the hour before dawn with Viserys wrapped in a common wool cloak and the newborn bundled against the wet. Braavos is 60 leagues of open water, but he knows men there. He has a letter of introduction from a lord who owes the Targaryens a debt he has not forgotten. The plan is not perfect, but the plan is real, and real has always been enough. He hears the garrison commander's boots on the stairs before he sees the man. The commander is a soldier from the Stormlands with a look on his face that Darry does not like. He carries a sealed document with 2 wax impressions, the crowned stag and the hand's ring. He stops in front of Darry and says carefully, "A royal ship has come into the harbor, sir, under the storm. It came under the storm deliberately, so there could be no question of us missing it." He holds out the document. "I am sorry. This supersedes any order I might otherwise have received." Darry does not take the document immediately. He stands in the corridor with his hand on the hilt of a sword. He knows he cannot draw, and he looks at the garrison commander for a long moment. Then he takes the document and reads it in the torchlight. From inside the room, Rhaella cries out once, a long sound that rises and breaks, and then there is a silence that is not peaceful. The midwife opens the door. Her face says what faces say, when they have to say something nobody has been prepared to hear. She is holding a bundle of cloth against her chest, and the bundle makes the thin crying sound that new things make when they have arrived in a world that is cold and loud, and nothing like where they came from. "The Queen," Darry says. "I am sorry, sir." He stands in the doorway for a long moment. Then he goes in. Viserys is already there. He has been there since before Darry could stop him, sitting on a low stool in the corner with his silver hair damp from rain that came through a gap in the window shutter, and he is watching his mother's face with the steady attention of a boy who has decided that if he keeps watching, what has happened will not be final. He has his hands in fists on his knees. He does not cry. Rhaella Targaryen lies still. Whatever she was in life, a queen, a prisoner, a woman who buried too many children before she was buried herself. She is very small now, and the storm outside has moved beyond the castle, pulling the noise away with it as it goes. The midwife brings the newborn to Darry. He takes her without thinking, the way you take something that needs to be held when you are the only person in the room still standing. The baby is impossibly small, as all new babies are impossible in their smallness. She has her eyes open, already squinting at the torchlight. The hair is there, silver gold, fine as silk. And the eyes, when they catch the light. Right, not quite blue, not quite grey, violet, Targaryen eyes without any question. "The storm is still out there," Viserys says from his corner. His voice is very careful. "She was born in it." Darry has no answer for that. He is still holding her when the captain comes in. The captain is a man from the royal ship, young enough to be uncomfortable with what he has been ordered to read aloud, in a room where a queen has just died. He unrolls a document and reads it without looking up. Viserys and the newborn Daenerys Targaryen are under royal protection by decree of King Robert Baratheon, first of his name. They are not to be removed from Dragonstone without royal authorization. They are not prisoners. They are wards of the crown. They are the king's guests. Sir Willem Darry is recognized as their guardian and may remain in his role under the authority of the garrison command. Viserys stands up from his stool. He is 8 years old, and small for it, narrow through the shoulders, with silver hair still damp and eyes that have been burning since the midwife opened the door. He walks to the middle of the room and stands between the captain and the baby in Daenerys' arms, and he says, with considerable clarity, "I am Viserys of House Targaryen, the third of his name. I am the rightful king of the Seven Kingdoms. You have no authority over me or my sister. You will leave this castle." The captain looks up from his document for the first time. He looks at the boy, he looks at Daenerys, he looks back at the document and rolls it up. Then he produces a second document. This one is shorter. It announces a royal betrothal by decree of King Robert Baratheon. The infant daughter of Queen Rhaella Targaryen and the late King Rhaegar Targaryen is betrothed to Jon Snow, legitimized by royal decree as the true-born son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. It is to be announced to all lords of the Seven Kingdoms. Viserys has gone very still. Daenerys watches the boy's face. He can see the moment the part that matters lands, not the betrothal, not even the legitimization. The name, the son of Rhaegar Targaryen. Someone has been named Rhaegar's legitimate heir, and it is not Viserys. It has never been Viserys in the eyes of the law, Robert has just written, because Viserys is the son of Aerys, not the son of Rhaegar. And the claim Viserys has been promised his whole life, the crown that is his by right. The boy says nothing for a long time. Then he turns and walks back to his stool and sits down and looks at his dead mother and says nothing further. The captain leaves. Daenerys stands in the doorway afterward, the baby still in his arms, and considers the choice he has already made and cannot unmake. The boat in the lower harbor is still there. The storm has passed enough to use it. His men are still ready, but Robert's ship is in the harbor. Robert's garrison is in every corridor, and the document he read in the torchlight is signed by a king who is alive and a king who is not a fiction. He looks at the infant in his arms. Silver gold hair, violet eyes, born in a storm that destroyed the last of her dynasty's fleet in a castle about to pass to a Baratheon lord, in a kingdom that belongs to the man who killed her father. She did not choose any of it. She is too new to understand any of it. She is the most politically significant child alive in the Seven Kingdoms tonight, and all she knows is that the person holding her is warm and the light is bright. "Little princess," Daenerys says softly. It is what he called Rhaenys before the sack, in another life. He cannot think of anything else to say. Somewhere below, the garrison is posting new sentries at the gates. Stannis Baratheon's ships are a fortnight behind the captain's vessel, bearing men and authority to hold Dragonstone as its new lord, a younger brother's compensation for a siege endured and a victory that was not his own. When Stannis arrives, he will find the volcanic island, its black towers and its dragon carvings, the children still living in the rooms where they were born, and he will give no one any indication of how he feels about any of it. Daenerys will still be here. The children will still be here, in a home that is no longer theirs, under a sky that has finally stopped screaming, with everything still to come. The years move the way years do when nobody is watching them, in weeks that seem long and seasons that pass before you have finished noticing them. By the time the realm's lords have accepted the betrothal as settled fact, there are children walking who were not yet born when the decree was signed. At Winterfell in 286 AC, 2 boys of 3 crash into each other in the yard like small falling trees and lie in the snow laughing. Robb Stark has red-brown hair and Tully eyes, and everything about him says Stark, the way that boys who are going to be lords carry it even at 3. Jon has dark hair and grey eyes and does not look any different from Robb, except that he is quieter. He picks himself up faster. He waits and sees before laughing. When a sparring lesson goes badly, he does not complain, he just starts again. Ned Stark watches both boys from the yard gate and says very little, which is how Ned Stark expresses most things. Catelyn Stark watches them from the upper walkway, her youngest wrapped against her chest in a shawl. Sansa was born in the first moon of this year, small and red-faced, and she is asleep now with no opinion about anything happening below. Catelyn's opinion is not so simple. She knows what Jon is. Ned told her before the first raven arrived from King's Landing, told her the truth, because Ned does not run a household on secrets when he can avoid it. Jon is not a bastard. He is the legitimized son of Rhaegar Targaryen and the betrothed of a Targaryen girl living on Dragonstone. He is a ward, a political piece, a guest of the North, who will one day be called South. She is not cold to him. He is not ashamed to hide. But she watches him stand up in the yard and dust snow from his knees while Robb laughs beside him, and she thinks about the fact that this boy will one day be summoned to King's Landing to take a position that will eclipse everything Robb is being raised to inherit. She thinks about that most days. It is not hatred, it is the particular fear of a mother who can already see the shadow on the path, long before the child reaches it. Meanwhile, at Dragonstone, Sir William Darry keeps a rough nursery in the castle's upper rooms. He has hung mismatched tapestries over the volcanic stone to soften the walls, and he calls Daenerys Little Princess each morning when he brings her breakfast, and he teaches Viserys from memory because the garrison's maester has made clear which books are appropriate. Daenerys, at 2 and 3 and 4, understands very little of what is happening around her. She understands that Darry is warm, and that the stone walls are cold, and that her brother has moods that arrive and depart like weather. Viserys, at 10 and 11 and 12, understands too much. He has made a thorough study of every person on the island who serves Stannis Baratheon, and has concluded that each of them is beneath him, which is a conclusion that helps him sleep and does nothing useful for anything else. He speaks to the garrison's officers with exaggerated courtesy, designed to communicate contempt. He speaks to the visiting courtiers who come to observe the children as if they were servants who have forgotten their place. He is patient about none of it. What Viserys has that passes for patience is simply anger held at a distance until it becomes useful. In 287 AC, at the Red Keep, Cersei Baratheon receives the Lords of the Reach at court, with her son Joffrey in her arms. The boy is barely a year old, fair-haired and loud, and every lord who looks at him is meant to see what Cersei intends: a Baratheon heir, the future of the house, the reason the succession is settled. The reason it is not settled, the fact of the betrothal and the Targaryen boy in Winterfell, is known to every one of these lords and spoken of by none of them in her presence. It hangs over every court gathering like a second ceiling, the legitimate heir of Rhaegar Targaryen, who will one day outrank her son by blood claim. Nobody has found a polite way to raise this with Cersei. Nobody tries twice. Darry dies in the first month of 289 AC. He goes quietly, in his bed, which is more than most of the people he served in his life managed. Daenerys is 5 years old. She does not understand what dead means, except that Darry will not bring her breakfast anymore, and will not call her little princess anymore, and the tapestries he hung on the walls are still there. Viserys sits with her through the first night and says nothing, because he has nothing useful to say. He is 13 years old, and the only Targaryen on an island that belongs to a Baratheon, with no army, no allies, and a sister who is crying because the only person who was kind to her is gone. Stannis Baratheon's garrison takes over full supervision of the children. The soldiers are not cruel. They are professional, which is sometimes worse than cruel, because it leaves no room to object. The children receive their meals and their tutors, and their allowance for firewood, and in all material respects are provided for, and in no other respect at all. 3 months after Daenerys' death, Balon Greyjoy raises the Ironborn. The news reaches Winterfell on a grey morning in late summer 289 AC. Ned Stark reads the Raven's message at the breakfast table and is mounted and riding before the meal has cooled. In the days that follow, the northern bannermen arrive, house by house, sigil by sigil, the grey direwolf on white coming in from every direction, across the snow and the heathered hills. Jon, age 6, watches from the wall, walk alongside Robb. He does not know what war is yet. He knows the men arriving carry swords that are not ceremonial, and that the yard is full of horses being saddled rather than stabled, and that the air has a particular quality to it when grown men are getting ready for something they cannot take back. He watches it all in silence. He has spent 6 years learning to watch things he does not fully understand without asking questions that would only be answered halfway. The rebellion takes the better part of a year. Robert rides with his lords. The Ironborn fight hard along the coast and harder still at Pike, but Robert Baratheon is not a king who negotiates with men who have already begun burning his shore. The fighting ends when Balon Greyjoy bends the knee at Pike with nothing left to bargain with, and the price Robert demands is the Lord's last living son. Theon Greyjoy arrives at Winterfell in the autumn 10 years old or near it, escorted by Ned's own guard. He is dark-haired and sharp-faced, and radiates the particular fury of a child who has been taken from everything he knew and has been told to be grateful. He does not speak at the evening meal. He eats what he is given and stares at the table. Jon watches him from across the hall, the set of his jaw, the way he sits very straight as if refusing to let anyone see how lost he is, and recognizes something that he cannot name precisely. He has spent 6 years living in someone else's house, belonging to no one quite the way the Stark children belong to Winterfell and to each other. He does not say this to Theon. He does not say it to anyone. Meanwhile, at Dragonstone, Viserys hears about the Greyjoy rebellion the way he hears about everything second-hand from garrison soldiers who are not speaking to him but who do not lower their voices enough. He listens to what they say about how quickly Robert mustered his banners, and how the Ironborn fleet was broken, and how Balon Greyjoy gave up his last son rather than lose the rest of his lands. He absorbs this information and files it where it belongs. Robert Baratheon is not a king about to fall. He put down a full rebellion in less than a year and took a lord's last son as surety and the realm held without any of the cracks showing. Any plan that depends on Robert's weakness is not a plan at all. Viserys turns his face back toward the sea. He needs something better. He does not have it yet. In the yards of Winterfell, a boy with dark hair and grey eyes is learning what it costs to lose. Jon is 8 years old, and he has just been knocked flat by a practice sword for the 3rd time this morning. Robb is standing over him, grinning, not trying to hide it. The yardmaster is watching without expression. Jon gets up, sets his feet, and goes again. He does not ask for a rest. He never asks for a rest. Robb fights hard because he wants to win. Jon fights hard because he cannot afford to do otherwise, and he has understood the difference since before he was old enough to name it. The Stark household fills and fills during these years. Arya arrives in 289 AC, a small, angry girl who screams her opinions from the first hour and does not stop, and Bran follows in 290 AC, solemn and wide-eyed, watching the older children the way he plans to catch up by observation alone. The nursery is full of Starks. Robb, then Jon, then Sansa, then Arya, then Bran, in descending order by age. Jon is in the middle of this only by arithmetic. He is not a Stark. He knows it. The children have never said it to him. Ned has never said it to him. But there are things you absorb from the shape of a household before anyone puts them into words. And Jon has absorbed this one carefully. He is a ward and a guest and a legitimized Targaryen heir by royal decree. He is betrothed to someone on Dragonstone who he has never met. He will one day leave. The Stark children will not. This is the line that Jon trains against every morning, the unspoken one between what he is and what he lives inside. He trains harder than Robb, not because he is better, but because Robb gets to rest on what he was born into, and Jon does not have that. Meanwhile, at Dragonstone, a girl with silver-gold hair is sitting cross-legged on a cold stone floor with an old book open in her lap. Daenerys is 7 years old. The book is about the Targaryen kings, their conquests, their dragons, their 3 centuries of dynasty. The garrison's maester provided it without comment. She has read it twice already. She is reading it again because there is not much else on this island, and because she is looking for something specific in the pages. Her father, Rhaegar Targaryen, silver-haired and melancholic, given to music and prophecy, a prince who rode to war and died for causes nobody fully explained to a child born after the war was over. The book describes him in formal terms that tell her very little about what he was like as a person. She reads the formal terms anyway. He is all she has access to. She knows she is betrothed to his son. Jon Snow, who lives in a northern castle, with snow in the yards, raised by a lord named Stark. She knows this because the garrison's captain told her when she was 5, in the same flat tone used to convey any administrative fact. She has never met Jon Snow. She does not know what he looks like. She imagines him silver-haired because his father was silver-haired, which may not be accurate, and she has no way to check. He is real only in the sense that her future is real. Something definitely coming, visible only in outline, from a distance she cannot yet judge. Stannis Baratheon's garrison are not cruel to her. This is the most that can be said about them. They keep their distance, and she keeps hers, and the volcanic castle keeps everyone sealed against the sea. Meanwhile, somewhere in the castle's upper rooms, Viserys Targaryen is writing a letter he is not supposed to write. He is 16. He has been on this island for 8 years, and he has used every one of them to think. The letter is addressed to Doran Martell, Prince of Dorne, the brother of the woman Gregor Clegane murdered in the Red Keep. Viserys has thought about what to offer. He keeps the term simple. If Dorne will recognize his claim and support it with Dornish swords, he will repudiate the betrothal that has placed his sister in a political arrangement she never agreed to, restore the honor of House Martell by acknowledging the wrong done to Elia. He is Aerys's son. He has always been Aerys's son. No decree from Robert Baratheon changes that. He seals the letter and bribes a sailor to carry it south on a trading vessel. Then he waits. No answer comes. In Sunspear, Prince Doran Martell reads the letter in his water gardens. He reads it once, slowly, because he has gout this year and pain makes reading slow. Then he sets it on the table beside his chair and looks out at the water where children are playing in the pools, laughing at nothing in particular, and he thinks for a long time. He does not respond. He does not destroy the letter, either. He puts it somewhere safe. The situation is not without interest. Oberyn is in Essos, fighting in sellsword companies. Doran's brother has always managed his grief by finding people he was allowed to kill. When Oberyn comes home, which he will, they will talk. Not about Viserys specifically. Doran does not think Viserys is the answer to anything. A hostage prince with no army, and no ships, and no allies offering promises from an island he cannot leave, is not an alliance. It is a liability in elegant clothing, but the letter is information. The betrothal between Rhaegar's son and Rhaegar's daughter runs through Robert's power, not Dornish swords. If it holds, Dorne must find some other way to address what happened. If it fails, if something cracks it, there may be space to move. Doran is in no hurry. He has never been in a hurry in his life, and his gout reminds him that time is the one resource he manages carefully. He watches the children play in the pools. He keeps the letter. Back at Winterfell one evening in late 292 AC, Ned Stark finds Jon in the stables after supper. Jon is 9. He has been brushing his horse in the half-dark, and it is apparent from his eyes that he has been thinking about something he is not going to mention unless asked. Ned sits on a hay bale and is quiet for a moment, which is the Stark way of opening a conversation. "You know what you are," Ned says. "It is not quite a question." Jon keeps brushing. "The king's ward, betrothed to Daenerys Targaryen. Legitimized by royal decree." He pauses. "I know the words. Do you know the rest of it?" Jon is quiet for a moment. "My mother wasn't a serving girl, also not a question. You never actually said she was. You just let everyone think what they were going to think." Ned does not look away. "Your mother was Lyanna Stark, my sister. She died the day you were born, in a tower in Dorne. She made me promise to keep you safe." There are things in this story he has not said aloud more than twice in 9 years, and they do not get easier. Your father's name was Rhaegar Targaryen. He married her in secret. You are his true-born son. That is the truth, all of it. Jon brushes the horse for a little while longer without speaking. Then he asks his one question, "Did she love me?" Ned looks at his hands. "She died before she had much time to show it. But she made me promise. She made me ride a very long way and do a very difficult thing. She did that because she loved the Stark she was. She loved you the same way." He meets Jon's eyes. "That is all I can give you on this." Jon nods once. He goes back to the horse. After a moment he says very quietly, "I will go to King's Landing one day." "Yes." "When?" "When the king decides it is time." Ned pauses. "Not yet." Jon brushes the horse's flank and does not speak again. He has asked the one question that mattered and gotten the answer he will carry from now on. There is nothing else to do with it tonight, except put it somewhere inside himself, where it will not get in the way. Above the yard, in the upper passage that overlooks the stables through a narrow window, Catelyn Stark has paused on her way from the nursery. She does not mean to listen. She has stopped because she heard Ned's voice and then stopped hearing words. She stands at the window and watches the lamplight below, and she thinks, as she has thought 100 times, about the boy with the grey eyes and the dark hair, who trains harder than Robb, who is quieter than Robb, who watches everything in the way of someone who is understood from very early. She does not hate him. She has never hated him. She is afraid of what it means that a boy like that, careful and patient and already carrying more than 9 years of knowledge, is going to King's Landing someday to take a place beside a Targaryen queen, and that when he does, every claim in the realm will rearrange itself around him. She turns from the window and carries the sleeping child in her arms back down the corridor toward the nursery. Oberyn Martell rides into King's Landing like a man who has been here before and found it wanting. He arrives with a Dornish retinue of 20 sun-bronzed riders, in orange and red, carrying Doran's seal and enough armor to make clear this is official business. He is officially here to congratulate Robert Baratheon on the 10-year betrothal and to deliver Dorne's formal acknowledgement. This is what the letter said. Every Lord Steward who sees the retinue pass through the gates passes that story to the next man. Within an hour, half the city knows that the Red Viper has come to kiss the king's ring. The other half knows that Oberyn Martell's sister died in this city 11 years ago, and that the man who killed her is still breathing. Robert receives him in the throne room. The Iron Throne rises at the far end of the hall, a thing of jagged ugliness forged from 1,000 surrendered swords by dragonfire, projecting nothing so much as the desire to make sitting look difficult. Robert sits on it in the way he has always sat on it, which is to say, with his legs spread and his expression suggesting he would rather be anywhere else. He is 31 years old and has been king for 10 years, and he is starting to look it, a little heavier, a little more impatient, still large enough that no one in the hall would be foolish enough to say so. Oberyn walks the length of the hall with unhurried steps and eyes that take inventory of everything. The dragon skulls mounted along the walls, the bones of dead Targaryen beasts arranged as decoration by a dynasty that is finished. The Lannister guardsmen posted at intervals, the courtiers arranged on both sides in their best clothes watching. He notes all of it, and his expression does not change. He reaches the foot of the throne and bows, correctly and completely, the way a man bows when he has decided that the bow costs him nothing. "Your Grace," he says, "Prince Doran sends his warmest regards and mine." Prince Oberyn. Robert leans forward on the throne. "We're told you come on behalf of Dorne." "I do." Oberyn straightens. His voice carries easily in the hall, and he does not pitch it for privacy. The betrothal between Jon, acknowledged son of Rhaegar Targaryen, and the Lady Daenerys Targaryen, is a matter in which Dorne has an abiding interest. Elia Martell was my sister. She died bearing Rhaegar's children in this city. The continuation of that line through these two living heirs is, in one sense, the continuation of what she gave her life for. He pauses, just long enough. Dorne wishes to formally acknowledge that this betrothal is a just arrangement, and that the union, when it comes, will have the recognition of House Martell. A murmur moves through the courtiers. He has been warned by Jon Arryn, among others, that the Red Viper does not travel from Sunspear to King's Landing to say only what he says in the first sentence. Dorne's recognition is welcome, Robert says carefully. It is. Oberyn agrees, with perfect courtesy. And there is one matter that must be addressed before it can be formally extended. The hall goes very quiet. "My sister was raped and murdered in this city," Oberyn says, still in the same conversational register, the same pleasant tone, as if he is recounting an administrative matter to be resolved. Her daughter Rhaenys was killed. Her son Aegon was killed. These were Rhaegar's children. The same blood that runs through Jon and Daenerys ran through them. The men who committed these acts and the men who ordered them have faced no reckoning in 11 years. He lets that sit for a moment. Dorne cannot formally consecrate the continuation of the Targaryen line while the murder of 3 members of that line goes unanswered. That is not a Dornish custom, Your Grace. The silence in the hall is the kind that nobody wants to be the first to break. Robert sits on the Iron Throne and looks at Oberyn Martell and knows, with the clarity of a man who has been waiting for this conversation for over a decade, exactly what is being said and exactly what he cannot say in return. He knows Tywin's role. He has known it since the morning after the sack, when he walked into the throne room and found what the Lannisters had left for him. He said nothing then. The war was over. Tywin had secured the city. The dead were already dead. He was 21 years old and about to be crowned, and there was no version of that morning in which he turned to Tywin Lannister and called him to account for what his men had done. So he did not. He has not spoken of it in 10 years, and Tywin has not spoken of it in 10 years, and the silence between them on this subject has been one of the foundational arrangements of the reign. He needs Dornish recognition. The betrothal is 10 years old, and the children are approaching the age when formalization becomes a real and practical matter, and a betrothal that goes unrecognized by a major house has a weakness in it that enemies will probe. The matter of the sack, Robert says at last, is a matter I have not forgotten. I will consider what you have raised. It is not a promise, it is not a refusal, it is exactly what it sounds like. A king buying time. Oberyn smiles. It is a pleasant smile. Of course. Your Grace Dorne is patient. He departs 3 days later, after banquets and courtesies and an evening of Dornish music that half the court attends and the other half declines on grounds of other engagements. On his final morning, he takes a slow ride along the Street of Steel, looking at the swords in the smith's windows with the interest of a man who understands what swords are for. He does not hurry. He said what he came to say. The first visit was never meant to produce an answer. It was meant to produce an understanding. The understanding has been produced. Ward reaches Casterly Rock within a fortnight, carried by the fastest rider Cersei could find, and written in terms that contain everything without stating any of it plainly. Tywin Lannister reads his daughter's message at his desk, sets it aside, and says nothing to anyone for 2 days. Then he calls for his steward and dictates a reply that is not addressed to Robert and not addressed to Oberyn, and contains no acknowledgement of what was discussed in the throne room. It is addressed to Cersei. It tells her in 4 sentences that the matter raised by the Dornish envoy concerns events carried out in service of the crown during a time of war, that Gregor Clegane acted as a soldier acts when his lord commands, and that any proceeding against him would constitute a proceeding against House Lannister, which is a proceeding against the Queen and her children and everything Cersei's marriage was meant to secure. He does not say, "This matter is not open for discussion." He does not need to. The 4 sentences say it in every direction at once. Cersei delivers the message to Robert in their chambers that evening when the servants are gone. She does not comment on it. She places it on the table and leaves the room. Robert reads it once, folds it, and sits with it in his hand for a long time. He has deferred the Dornish demand. He knows it is still there. He knows what it will cost him to answer it. He pours himself a cup of wine and does not decide anything tonight. Meanwhile, on Dragonstone, Viserys hears of the visit, the way he hears of everything, in fragments, from soldiers who underestimate what he is listening for. An envoy from Dorne came to King's Landing, the Red Viper himself. Officially, a congratulatory visit about the betrothal. Unofficially demands something about the sack, something about Elia Viserys. Sits with this for several days. He sent a letter to Doran Martell 2 years ago and received no answer. But Doran's brother just traveled to King's Landing on Dornish business that touched directly on the Targaryen line. That is not the action of a house that has closed the door. That is the action of a house that is waiting to see which way the door opens. He does not write another letter. Not yet. But he remembers that the first one was not destroyed. The Raven arrives at Winterfell on a morning in late 295 AC, sealed with the crowned stag, and written in the hand's formal hand. Ned reads it at the breakfast table, and then reads it again. Jon watches him from across the room and says nothing, because he has learned over 12 years that Ned Stark's silences sort themselves out eventually, and asking questions only slows them down. Ned sets the letter on the table and looks at his ward. "The king has summoned you to court," he says. "The time has come to present the betrothed pair formally. You are to come to King's Landing." Jon is 12 years old and has never been further south than the Neck. He absorbs this, the way he absorbs most things, without visible reaction. "When do we leave?" Robb rides with them. Ned's idea, or perhaps Catelyn's, a companion for a journey that might otherwise feel entirely like a formal delivery. The three of them take the King's Road south with a modest escort, and Jon discovers, over the course of 2 weeks of riding, that the world gets warmer the further south you go, and that the trees eventually stop looking like the trees he knows and start looking like something drawn from a different story. He has spent his whole life in the north, and it has shaped him in ways he does not have words for yet. He is dark-haired and grey-eyed, narrow through the shoulders still, but tall for his age, and he watches the landscape change with the attention of someone cataloguing a world he will have to know. "What do you think she is like?" Robb asks on the 3rd week, because Robb has fewer silences than Jon, and eventually asks the questions. "I don't know," Jon says. "It is the honest answer. She has been a name and a political fact and a face he cannot imagine for as long as he can remember." King's Landing announces itself long before they reach it. First in smell, then in sound, then in the sheer mass of humanity visible through the gates when the walls appear on the horizon. Jon has known since childhood that 500,000 people live behind those walls. But knowing a number and arriving at the thing the number describes are 2 different experiences entirely. The city is vast in the way that nothing in the north is vast, dense and loud and layered with 100 years of built over itself, every street crowded, every roofline different, the smell of the harbour cutting through everything else. The Red Keep rises above it all on its hill, red stone towers and the massive square bulk of the castle, and Jon looks up at it and thinks of the infant he once was, and the decree Robert wrote in this place, and feels the distance between that child and this morning like a physical thing. The corridors of the Red Keep smell of stone and torchlight and something older. The dragon skulls line the passage from the outer gate to the great hall, mounted on the walls in descending order of size, the oldest and largest near the entrance, their bone gone dark and dense with age. Jon walks past them with the rest of Ned's party, and then stops at one without meaning to. The skull is enormous, larger than he imagined, the jaw alone longer than he is tall. He puts his hand on the bone, and it is cold and smooth and dense. He is descended from the men who rode these creatures. He has known this in the abstract since he was 9, and Ned told him in the stables. This is the first time he has stood inside it. It does not feel like glory. It feels like something he will have to carry, heavy and cold, and belonging to a world that ended before he was born. He takes his hand off the skull and follows Ned inside. Daenerys Targaryen is brought to the receiving room by 2 attendants, and she enters the way she has clearly been instructed to enter, composed, unhurried, spine straight. She is 11 or 12, small for her age, with silver gold hair worn loose over her shoulders and eyes that are unmistakably violet in the afternoon light from the window. She looks at Jon with a careful expression that gives nothing away, and Jon looks at her with an expression that probably gives away more than he intends, because he has never mastered the court version of a face. The courtiers and maesters arranged around the room watch, with the attention of people who will discuss this for weeks. "My lord," Daenerys says, her voice is steady. She has been practicing steadiness for years. "I am told we are to be formally introduced, Jon," he says, and then remembers that is not the form, and adds, "Jon Snow, well, legitimized. Lord Jon, they tell me." Something in her face does not quite change, but something in her eyes does. "I know who you are," she says. "I have known since I was 5. She pauses. "They told me you had dark hair." Something that is not quite a smile, but is related to one, crosses her face very quickly and disappears. The courtiers lean forward, almost imperceptibly. The formal introduction goes on for another quarter of an hour, conducted largely by the Maester overseeing the event, while Jon and Daenerys stand approximately 6 feet apart and respond to each other's remarks with the care of two people trying not to say something wrong in front of witnesses. By the end of it, they have successfully established that they are both alive and present and have no obvious objection to each other, which is, Jon gathers, the desired outcome. Over the days that follow, away from the watched rooms and the hovering attendants, they find a different language. It starts in the training yard, where Jon goes each morning out of habit. She follows him there one morning and watches him practice against a post, and when he offers to show her the basic positions, she accepts with more seriousness than he expected. She has been taught to sit still, to present herself, to move through rooms as an object to be observed. She has not been taught to fight. Pauled. She learns the footwork in an hour, which tells him something about how much is in there waiting for something to do with itself. "Tell me about the north," she says one afternoon, when they are sitting on a low wall in the yard, with the city noise rising over the rooftops below. Jon describes it in the way he knows it, the cold that comes in from the east before autumn ends, the sound of the godswood at night, the grey sky that sits above Winterfell for months at a time, without breaking, the feeling of the snow underfoot that changes depending on whether it fell last night or last week. He describes Robb and the training yard, and the way Caiton looks at him from across rooms, and Ned's silences, and the direwolf carved over the castle gate. Daenerys listens with the particular attention of someone absorbing a world she has never seen. Then she tells him about Dragonstone. The black stone that is not quite stone, carved with dragon shapes by hands that have been dead for centuries. The way the volcanic rock smells in the rain. The sound the sea makes at night in the caves below the castle. The painted table that takes up most of a room and shows all of Westeros laid out in carved relief, the 7 kingdoms spread under your hands when you stand above it. "I used to stand on a chair to reach the northern part," she says. "Just to see where you were." Jon looks at her. "You looked for Winterfell on the map. I was 9, she says, slightly defensive. "You were all I knew about the north." There is something in both their lives that rhymes, even if the notes are different. Both of them were handed a Targaryen story before they were old enough to read. Both of them grew up inside someone else's arrangement, in houses that were kind enough in the material sense, and something else in the sense that cannot be measured in firewood and meals. They do not say any of this directly. They are both 12 and 13, and the language for it does not exist yet. But it is there, in the pauses between things, and in the way they stop being formal with each other around the 4th day and do not go back. From across the great hall, a figure watches them walk together through the gardens below the window. Viserys Targaryen is 20 years old, with silver hair and violet eyes, and the posture of a man who has spent a decade rehearsing a dignity that keeps failing to materialize. He watches his sister walk beside the dark-haired Stark boy, Grey eyes, no Targaryen feature visible, nothing in his face or his coloring that announces the blood he carries, and he feels something that has been building for years reach a new pitch. He was born to the throne. He is Aerys's son. He is the elder surviving Targaryen. He stood over their mother's body on the night this arrangement was written, too small and too alone to stop any of it, and now he stands at a window watching a boy from Winterfell walk through the gardens of the Red Keep, as if it already belongs to him. The contempt Viserys has cultivated for years has become something harder and more specific. It has become the contempt of a man who has decided. Robert receives Jon in his solar on the last day before Ned takes the party north. He pours 2 cups of wine and sets one in front of the boy, then picks it up again and looks at it and sets it aside, because Jon is 13 at most, and this is the kind of thing you think about afterward. He studies the boy across the table. Dark hair, grey eyes, stark in every line of his face, nothing of Rhaegar visible, which is not a loss in Robert's estimation. Jon meets his gaze without looking away, which Robert notes. "You know who your father was," Robert says. "Yes, Your Grace." "Then you know he was the kind of man who believed his own story so thoroughly, he brought a war down on everyone else." Robert's voice is not cruel about this. It is simply the voice of a man who has had 13 years to arrive at an assessment. He rode to his death at the Trident, believing he was fulfilling some prophecy. Left a trail of other people's misery behind him. He looks at Jon for a moment. "Your father was a fool who played at prophecy. Don't be a fool." Jon does not answer immediately. Then he says, "I don't know what I believe yet." Robert stares at him. Then he reaches for the wine he took back and drinks it himself. "Fair enough," he says. "It is the closest Robert Baratheon will come to giving fatherly advice, and it will have to be enough." Jon had planned to stay a fortnight. He has been at King's Landing for 2 months. Nobody has officially extended the invitation, and nobody has officially rescinded it, which in court terms means he is welcome, or at least not unwelcome enough for anyone to act on it. Ned has stayed with him. He writes to Catelyn every week and receives letters back that describe Winterfell in careful detail and ask questions about the court that are entirely polite and entirely without warmth. Jon has stopped counting the days. He has started counting what the days contain. Most of them contain the training yard in the mornings. Daenerys arrives on the 3rd morning and does not ask permission to join him. She simply takes the 2nd practice sword from the rack and stands opposite the post and waits. Jon shows her the grip, she had it wrong, fingers too tight, which will tire her arm before it needs to tire. She adjusts without comment. He shows her the basic sequence: high guard, transition, extension. She repeats it 4 times slowly, and then does it again at speed, and gets it mostly right. She does not celebrate getting it right. She just moves on to the next thing. Jon has spent 14 years around people who learn by doing, and he recognizes the pattern: they do not talk much in the yard. The talk happens in the other parts of the day, in the corridors, in the gardens, in the long late afternoons when the court is occupied with its own business, and 2 young people who do not belong to any of its factions can sit in a window embrasure and exist without agenda. Jon describes the North in pieces, and she listens the way she listens to everything, completely. She asks questions that make him realize she has been thinking about the North as a physical place her whole life, from whatever sources she had on Dragonstone. She knows the names of the Stark Lords going back 4 generations. She knows the wall exists, but has never seen it. She knows Jon's horse is a bay gelding. He told her that in a letter, 9 years ago, at Ned's suggestion. She remembered. "Show me the map." He has heard her mention it twice without explaining. She produces it from her room and unrolls it on the table between them. Dragonstone, rendered in careful ink on 2 joined sheets of parchment. Every room labeled, every passage noted with direction and approximate distance. The painted table's room. The dragon glass mine shafts below the castle. The garrison quarters. The watch rotations annotated in a different ink from a later date. The tidal access points she has measured over years by the sound of water in the lower passages. Jon looks at it for a long time. "You have been mapping your own prison," he says. "I have been mapping my home," she says, with a precision that is not defensive but clarifying. "It is both. I found that knowing the shape of a place was better than not knowing, regardless of what the place was." He looks at her across the map and understands, with more clarity than is comfortable, that she has spent 13 years doing the same thing he has, learning the dimensions of a situation that was not of her choosing and finding the useful edges of it. Neither of them has been given a life to live freely. Both of them have been given a future to navigate toward. The methods are different, and the specific cages are different, but the underlying practice is not. He knows her better in this moment than he knew anyone in the first year of knowing them, and he has known her for 2 months. Meanwhile, across the city, in rooms that are harder to trace and harder to enter, Viserys Targaryen is meeting a man. The man is a minor court lord, the kind of figure who circulates through the capital without appearing in any formal accounting of power, attached to no great house, owing small obligations in many directions, useful precisely because he does not officially exist in any important context. He has been introduced to Viserys by someone else, equally careful about attribution. The conversation is conducted in a hired room above a wine merchant's establishment on the Street of Sisters, in the hour before supper, when the city is loud enough that nobody's business is anybody else's. Viserys has thought about what he wants and what he can offer. He presents it clearly. He will publicly renounce any personal claim to the Iron Throne. This costs him nothing. He has not already effectively lost. He has been a ward with no army for 14 years. In exchange, he wants freedom, genuine freedom. The freedom to leave the island, to travel, to be something other than the preserved shame of a dead dynasty. He wants Lannister protection, which means Cersei's goodwill and Tywin's grudging acknowledgement. And he wants the Lannisters to pursue what they share with him, the desire to see the betrothal broken. A legitimized Targaryen heir, he explains, stands above Cersei's children in the line of blood claim. Robert decreed it. The decree does not change what succession means. The intermediary listens. The intermediary carries the proposal to Lannister agents. The proposal reaches Cersei within 3 days. She receives it in her rooms with Jaime present and no one else, and she reads it twice in the way she reads things that might be useful, looking first for what she wants to find, then for what will go wrong. Viserys himself is not the instrument. He is too unreliable, too exposed to scrutiny, and the moment he acts publicly his usefulness ends. But the question he has identified is real. The legal foundation of the betrothal rests on the legitimacy of the Rhaegar Lyanna marriage. That marriage was performed by a septon, in secret, before a heart tree in Dawn, witnessed by no one of standing, sanctioned by no high septon, and acknowledged by no lord. The annulment of Rhaegar's previous marriage to Elia Martell, Elia, whose family controls half of Dawn, was performed under the same conditions. There is no public record, there is no official document. There is only a dead man's claim and a decree that Robert wrote in the first year of his reign, when he was 21 years old and doing Ned Stark a political favor. If a legal challenge were raised in the proper forum, by the proper parties, citing the proper absence of evidence, it would not win, but it would not need to win. It would only need to exist long enough to introduce doubt, to delay the formalization, to give the realm a reason to ask whether the betrothal is built on solid ground or on something thinner. Cersei writes to her father. The letter is brief. It does not mention Viserys by name. At Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister reads it and does nothing for a week. He does not trust Viserys. The man is volatile and has no discipline and no army and no support in the realm, and any plan that depends on Viserys behaving consistently is a plan with a flaw built into its foundation. If someone with standing were to raise the question in the proper context, not Viserys, not a Lannister directly, but someone of sufficiently neutral standing, the question could create useful turbulence without being traceable to its source. Tywin does not commit to anything. He sends a reply through Cersei. It consists of one sentence. A finding that challenges the legality of the Rhaegar-Lyanna marriage would be a matter for the High Septon and the appropriate legal authorities to determine, and that is, as it should be. It is not a promise of support, it is not a refusal. It is a door left slightly open, and Viserys's intermediary is told that it is there. Meanwhile, in the late evening after supper, Jon finds Ned on the parapet above the outer yard. He has been turning the same question over for 2 months, and it has worn smooth with handling. And this is the last evening before Ned insists they leave. So he asks it, "Did you want this for me?" Ned does not pretend not to understand the question. "No. Did you think it was right? I thought it was the safest thing." Ned looks out at the city below, the lights beginning to appear in the windows as the dark comes in. There was no version of the truth in which you were entirely safe. This was the version in which you were most accounted for. It is not the same thing as right. Jon leans on the stone. Do I have a choice about any of it? Less than you deserve. More than you might think. Ned turns to look at him. You can be a hostage in a gilded arrangement. Or you can be the thing the arrangement was supposed to produce, something that holds the realm in a shape that doesn't require another war every 10 years. The betrothal is the scaffolding. What you build on it. He is quiet for a moment. Then he says something that he has not said before. All the years I carried the secret, the thing I was most afraid of was not that you would find out. It was that you would find out and there would be nothing. No purpose, no weight that pointed somewhere, just a name and a blood claim that went nowhere. He looks back at the city. At least now there is something worth the weight of it. Jon thinks about Daenerys' map, spread out on the table between them. A place mapped by someone learning to know the shape of a thing that was not of her choosing. She has been thinking about all of this longer than I have, he says. Yes, Ned says simply. She has. They stand on the parapet for a while longer and then go in. Meanwhile, in his rooms on Dragonstone, for Viserys has returned to the island, word of the meeting following him back. He sits at a table with a sheet of parchment and begins to write. The document is careful. It raises in the form of a question addressed to no specific authority, whether any public or primary source record exists confirming that Rhaegar Targaryen lawfully annulled his marriage to the Lady Ilia Martell before the event at the Tower of Joy. It notes the absence of any High Septon sanction. It notes the absence of any witness of standing. It asks, in the measured language of someone who has been rehearsing this for months, whether a marriage contracted in secret before a single septon and no lord of rank constitutes a marriage valid enough to produce a legitimate heir. He does not know about Septon Maynard's journal at the Citadel. He does not know about Howland Reed, who was at the Tower of Joy and is alive and in Greywater Watch. He is working from what the realm does not know, which is technically a great deal. The absence of public evidence is real. The legal question is real. The plan is not strong enough to win, but it is strong enough to move. Oberyn Martell's second arrival at King's Landing is nothing like his first. 5 years ago he rode in with 20 men and a diplomatic pretext and a smile that said he was measuring the room. Now he comes with 60 riders, a formal Dornish delegation bearing pennants, and a letter sealed with Doran's personal seal in black and orange wax. He does not smile when he passes through the gates this time. He is doing something else with his face, something that the gate guards recognize as patience, of a very specific kind, the kind that has already run out and is only performing the formality until proceedings catch up to the conclusion. The city notices Dornish delegations of this size do not arrive for congratulations. Robert receives him in the small council chamber rather than the throne room, which is a smaller audience and a more honest one. Varys is present in the corner. He always occupies in the corner. Pycelle at the far end. Cersei sits to Robert's right with an expression that has been assembled for this occasion. Composed, attentive, slightly distant, exactly the expression of a woman who knows what the letter says before it is read and intends for no one to see that. Ned Stark stands behind Robert's left shoulder as he has stood in this room 100 times. Jon is not in the chamber. He is 15 years old and waiting in a corridor outside because Robert decided to include him in the latter part of this meeting, and nobody has come to fetch him yet. Oberyn breaks the seal himself and reads the letter aloud, which is not the usual form but is today's form, because he wants to hear himself say it. Doran Martell, Prince of Dorne, writes to his good cousin the king. The betrothal between the legitimized son of Rhaegar Targaryen and the Lady Daenerys Targaryen has been before the realm for 15 years. It approaches the point of formal consecration. House Martell acknowledges that this union represents the continuation of the blood of Rhaegar Targaryen, and that Dorne has a direct interest in how that blood is treated by the kingdom that currently governs it. The letter then states, without embellishment, what Dorne requires before formal recognition can be extended: an accounting of the deaths of Elia Martell, Princess Rhaenys, and Prince Aegon. Not a gesture, not an acknowledgement in private, a public proceeding held before witnesses that establishes what was done and by whose order. Oberyn sets the letter on the table and looks at Robert. The betrothal needs Dornish recognition now in a way it did not 5 years ago, he says. Jon and Daenerys are no longer infants sealed in a document. They are people approaching the age of marriage, and the realm is watching whether this arrangement is a true settlement or a performance of one. My price has not changed in 15 years, only the urgency has. The room is quiet. Robert looks at the letter and does not look at Cersei. He knows what she is carrying from Casterly Rock. He knows what Tywin has said through her in the last month, and the month before, in the increasingly specific language of a man who has been watching this moment approach. He knows what a Targaryen blood proceeding against Gregor Clegane means for the man who ordered it. The Lannister armies, the Lannister gold. These are not abstractions. They are what stabilizes a reign that is now 15 years old and has survived one major rebellion and survived 3 years of drought and survived the various stresses that any reign accumulates over time. Tywin Lannister has never stated his support explicitly. He has never needed to. The implicit arrangement has been the foundation of everything. And he needs Dornish recognition. He has known it for 5 years. Without it, the betrothal is a unilateral Baratheon decree that has not been accepted by all the major houses of the realm. The Targaryen question is not answered. It is only postponed. Half the realm will always be able to say the matter remains open, and half the realm saying something is open is how wars begin. Cersei speaks before Robert can. Her voice is even. House Lannister views any proceeding against men who acted in service of the crown during the legitimate military operations of the rebellion as a proceeding against those who helped bring this peace into being. She does not say Tywin's name. She does not need to. Everyone in the room heard Tywin's actual message in those 4 sentences, stated clearly and without a gram of heat in it. This is not a threat. It is a fact about the physical architecture of the realm. Robert says nothing for a long time. Then he asks Oberyn to give him a fortnight. Oberyn agrees. He bows correctly and says he will enjoy the city's hospitality in the meantime. It is on the 2nd day of Oberyn's stay that he finds Jon. The encounter is not entirely accidental. Oberyn moves through the Red Keep like a man who has made a study of where things are, and Jon spends his mornings in the training yard, which is a fact about Jon that anyone paying attention would know within a day. Oberyn leans on the yard fence and watches him practice against a post for a while, and then says, "Your footwork is northern. It works better in mud than in heat." Jon stops. He knows who this is. Prince Oberyn. "I wanted to speak with you," Oberyn says, in the same conversational register he uses for everything, which is the register of a man who considers formality and inefficiency. "I have a question first. How much do you know about your father's other children?" Jon sets down the practice sword. The question lands the way Oberyn intends it to land, which is precisely, "Not much," Jon says carefully. "Then I will tell you." Oberyn does not soften what comes next, because he has decided that Jon is 15 years old and will one day rule alongside Rhaegar's daughter and has a right to the full weight of what he is inheriting. He tells Jon about Aelia, his father's first wife, Dornish, intelligent, physically fragile but not weak, a woman who bore Rhaegar 2 children while ill and who raised them in the Red Keep, and who was still in those rooms with her children. He tells Jon the names: Rhaenys, who was 2 years old and was found under her father's bed where she had apparently crawled to hide, and Aegon, who was an infant. He tells Jon who found them. He tells Jon what Gregor Clegane did with his hands. Jon stands in the training yard for a long time without speaking. "I did not know their names," he says at last. "You know them now," Oberyn says. He is not without sympathy. He has also lived 15 years with these names. They were your blood half-siblings. Your father's children, the men who killed them, walk free in this kingdom. That is the thing I came here to say to whoever in this court had the right to hear it fully. He looks at Jon steadily. Now you have heard it. Jon requests a private word with Robert that same afternoon. Robert receives him in his solar and reads him correctly the moment he comes through the door. The expression on Jon's face is the expression of someone who has just had the floor reorganized under them and has decided to walk on it anyway. He pours himself a cup of wine and does not offer one this time. Jon is 15 and has been offered and had it taken back. And this is not that kind of conversation. "Oberyn told you," Robert says. "Yes." Jon stands in front of the desk in the way Ned stands in front of desks, which is to say upright and direct, and without any wasted performance. "I want to ask you something, Your Grace, and I am asking it plainly. Will there be justice for what was done in the sack?" Robert looks at him. "That is not a simple question. I know. I am not asking for it to be simple. I am asking whether this kingdom intends to hold its own lords to account for what they do under its banners. That is the question I need an answer to. Not because of my bloodline. because of what it means for everything this arrangement is supposed to build. Jon does not look away. My father's children were killed. The people who killed them are alive. If that goes unanswered, it does not answer the Targaryen question. It only papers over it. Robert looks at the boy across the desk. Dark-haired, gray-eyed, stark in every feature. He says, "I will consider it carefully. It is a dismissal." Jon recognizes it as one and takes it without argument. He bows and leaves. Robert sits alone in the solar afterward for a long time. He has walls on 3 sides, Tywin on one, Dawn on another, and now on the third, the honest question from a 15-year-old boy who has learned his truth-telling from a man who told Robert a truth in this very castle 15 years ago. The peace exists because Ned was honest. The peace is now demanding he be honest in return. He can see this clearly. Seeing it clearly does not make it easier. He pours another cup and does not decide anything tonight, which is what he always tells himself, and which has been true fewer and fewer times recently. Meanwhile, at Dragonstone, Viserys receives the news of Oberyn's return and the council meeting's outcome in fragments over 3 days, and he assembles them into a picture that he finds satisfying. Robert is cornered. Tywin is drawing lines. The betrothal is under structural pressure. The crack between the king and his most powerful ally is becoming visible. This is the moment. Not next month, not next year. He does not understand, because he has never been able to understand, that Tywin Lannister does not have allies. He has arrangements, and he has tools, and a tool that has drawn attention to itself in a public place is a tool that has become a liability and is therefore no longer a tool worth carrying. Viserys has been useful because he was quiet, and because his legal challenge existed as a latent threat that Cersei could point at without acknowledging. The moment he becomes loud, the moment he steps into the open, that calculation changes instantly and entirely. He does not understand this. He begins making arrangements for a ship. Viserys moves at the 2nd hour past midnight when the city is as quiet as a city of 500,000 ever gets. He has planned this for 3 weeks. The ship is a Lysine trader called the Silken Hour, berthed at the 3rd dock, south of the Fishmonger's Gate, captained by a man who asked no questions after the coin cleared his palm. Viserys carries a travel cloak, a purse, and a leather satchel containing 2 documents: his draft legal challenge to the Rhaegar Lyanna marriage, and a letter from a Lannister intermediary that does not name Tywin and does not commit to anything but whose existence is in Viserys' reading. He has walked this route in his mind so many times that his feet know it before his eyes do. He does not know that Varys has known about the ship since the day the booking was made. The Master of Whisperers has had the satchel's contents described to him by a boy of 9 who works on the docks and who can read enough to copy the key phrases onto a slate and carry it across the city without understanding what it means. The middleman's identity was provided by a girl of 11 who sweeps the hallway outside the room where the arrangement was discussed. The route through the city was observed by a boy of 12, who has been watching the corner where the Street of Steel meets the Harbour Road every evening for 10 days. Varys did not stop the series when he first learned the plan. He waited. A man intercepted quietly in his room is a rumour. A man intercepted at the city gates, with soldiers and small folk witnessing, is a public event, and public events, properly timed, produce permanent outcomes. He sent the note to Robert an hour ago. Robert is awake. Robert's men are already at the King's Gate. Viserys sees the soldiers when he rounds the last corner before the gate. There are 8 of them in Baratheon livery, and they are not in a line for a ceremony. They are standing in the way. He stops. The cloak settles around him in the night air. He looks at the men, at the gate behind them, at the harbor beyond. The mast of the Silken Hour is visible just above the line of the wall if you know where to look. And he does the arithmetic that has been building in his chest since he was 8 years old. He considers the sword he is wearing, which he has practiced with in private, though not as consistently as he should have. He considers the 8 soldiers who have the look of men who practice consistently and professionally, and every single day. He considers running. He considers screaming. He does none of these things. Not yet, Lord Viserys. The guard captain's voice is neutral, not unkind. The kindness is the problem, the specific kindness of a man explaining to someone that the situation is already resolved. The king's order is that you return to your quarters. You are not to leave the city. Viserys is 22 years old and has been a ward and a prisoner and a political problem for 14 years, and he is standing 30 feet from a ship that would have taken him out of all of it, and he has nothing. No Lannister backing, no Dornish alliance. The things he has built in the last 3 years exist in documents and private messages, and the carefully maintained fiction of implied support that has never once been tested against the actual weight of reality. What he has is his voice and a public location. And the knowledge that it is the 2nd hour past midnight, and even at this hour, there are faces in the windows above the street and small folk pressed against the far wall of the lane, watching, because people always watch when soldiers are involved. He decides to use these things. "I am Viserys of House Targaryen," he says loudly enough that the watchers in the windows will hear it. "I am the son of Aerys II, King of the 7 Kingdoms. I stand before you tonight to say what has not been permitted to be said in this city for 15 years. He does not shout. He projects the way a man speaks when he wants to be heard from a distance and wants it to sound like reason. The legitimacy of the betrothal between my sister and the boy called Jon Snow rests on a marriage that was never publicly confirmed. Rhaegar Targaryen is said to have annulled his lawful marriage to Aelia Martell, my sister's mother. This annulment was never recognized by any high septon. It was performed in secret, in a tower in Dorne, before a single septon whose record has not been produced before any court or council. The claim that Jon Snow is the legitimate son of Rhaegar Targaryen is built on evidence that does not publicly exist. His voice carries in the quiet street. My sister is being traded between a Baratheon king and a bastard's claim dressed in legal clothes. I am the elder surviving Targaryen. I was born to this throne. And I am telling anyone in this city who can hear me that what has been presented to you as settled is not settled. It has never been settled. The guard captain lets him finish, then says calmly, "The king's order stands." Robert's voice comes from behind the soldiers. He has arrived quietly, without announcement, and he is wrapped in a riding cloak, with nothing ceremonial about him. He looks at Viserys the way he has always looked at Viserys, which is with the specific patience of a man tolerating something he has long since decided how to end. "Bring Daenerys," he says to someone behind him. She arrives within 10 minutes, attended by 2 guards, in a cloak thrown over her sleeping clothes. Her silver-gold hair is loose. She looks at the soldiers first, at the gate, at the street, then at Viserys. Her face is the face she wears in court when she is being observed, composed, legible only to someone who has spent time reading it. Viserys turns to her. His silver hair is disheveled now, the careful presentation of the last few hours undone by the night and the tension. He looks at her with the expression of a man who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has reached the moment when he either sets it down or drops it. "Dany," he says, and his voice is quieter now, just for her, stripped of the public register he has been using. Tell them I am Aerys's son. Tell them what we are. Daenerys looks at her brother. She has known him her whole life. He was 8 years old when she was born, and he stood over their mother's body in the dark and refused to cry. He called her little sister and kept the Targaryen words alive for her, and told her who she was when there was no one else to tell her. He was not always kind. He was often frightened in the shape of fury and desperate in the shape of contempt. But he was there every morning, in a volcanic castle on an island that was not theirs, and she has loved him in the way you love the one fixed thing in a world with nothing else fixed. She looks at Jon, standing to the side of the gathered soldiers, dark hair, grey eyes, watching her with the same still attention he uses for everything, not telling her what to do, not telling her what he needs from her, just watching and being what he is, which is a person she has chosen. She looks back at Viserys. She says nothing. The silence is not a rejection. It costs her. But she has spent 14 years watching her brother reduce the Targaryen identity to an instrument of his own grievance, pointing it at everyone who had what he wanted, wearing it like an accusation against the world. She has a different world now. She is not going to spend the rest of her life inside his version of theirs. Viserys reads her face. He reads it correctly, which is the only mercy left in this moment that he understands without being told. Something in his expression goes very still and then goes somewhere she has never seen before on his face. Then the guard captain takes him by the arm, not unkindly, and he does not resist. Ward reaches Castle Rock before noon of the same day, a raven and then another. By the time Cersei receives the account, it is complete. The gate, the speech, the legal challenge, delivered to a street audience of soldiers and sleepless small folk in the middle of the night. Tywin reads it in his study. Then he dictates a reply which Cersei delivers to Robert in writing before the day is out. It is brief. House Lannister has no knowledge of any activities undertaken by Viserys Targaryen and extends no recognition or support to any claim that introduces instability into the peace of the realm. House Lannister remains a loyal supporter of the crown. It is not a surprise. It was never going to be anything other than this. A man like Tywin Lannister does not have loyalties. He has calculations and a tool that has made itself visible in a public street in the middle of the night and drawn attention to every arrangement that was supposed to be invisible is a tool that has become a liability. The same arithmetic that made Viserys useful when he was quiet makes him a problem now that he is loud. The message does not say any of this because Tywin does not explain himself. The message is simply the door closed with nothing further required. Viserys is confined to a room in the Red Keep with a guard at the door. He is not mistreated. He is not in a dungeon. He is exactly as much a prisoner as he has always been, just without the pretense of the opposite, which is the only thing that has actually changed. Robert sits in his solar and looks at the chessboard on the desk. The Lannister faction has taken a visible public step back. Tywin is still at Casterly Rock, still powerful, still dangerous, in the long, strategic way that powerful men are dangerous when they have decided to wait. But the immediate opposition is quieter. The Viserys piece has been moved off the board and is no longer available to anyone. And the legal challenge shouted into a night street by a disheveled prince to an audience of soldiers and insomniacs has been made to look exactly as substantial as it was. He needs to decide what to do about Gregor Clegane. Robert Baratheon makes his decision on a grey morning 3 days after Viserys is confined, sitting in his solar with an untouched breakfast and the weight of the calculation he has been avoiding for 15 years. Tywin has retreated publicly. The disavowal of Viserys was also, necessarily, a public step back from the years of implied opposition to the betrothal that the disavowal was built on. Tywin is not finished. Robert is not so foolish as to think that, but the political cost of action against Gregor Clegane has dropped from catastrophic to manageable. The Lannister position at court is weaker today than it was a week ago. Robert has always understood that windows open and close, and that the men who hesitate in windows tend to find them shut. He sends for Oberyn Martell. Oberyn arrives with the ease of a man who has been expecting the summons and has decided not to let it show. Robert receives him without courtiers only, Jon Arryn present as witness, and Ned standing behind the chair. Robert says, "I am prepared to grant Dawn justice for Aelia Martell and her children. I cannot give them back. I can answer for what was done to them." He looks at Oberyn. "I am told Dornish law recognizes trial by combat as legitimate judgment before the gods." "It does," Oberyn says. "Then name your champion." Oberyn looks at him steadily. "I will stand myself. The combat is announced within the week. The charge: murder under the colors of the rebellion of Aelia Martell, Princess Rhaenys Targaryen, and Prince Aegon Targaryen, by Gregor Clegane." Robert's notification to Tywin Lannister is 4 sentences, the most efficient statement he has ever sent to Casterly Rock. It informs, it does not request. It ends with, "This is not a matter open for discussion." He does not send a second letter. Gregor Clegane does not refuse. A man of his history and his reputation cannot refuse a formal royal decree of trial by combat without something worse following. He comes to King's Landing with the same blunt assurance he has always carried, which is the assurance of a man who has never encountered a problem large enough to make him uncertain. They meet in the yard behind the Red Keep on a cold morning in late 298 AC, before the king and his council and a gallery of lords who have found reasons to be in the city this week. The yard has been cleared and sanded. Maester Pycelle is present in his formal capacity. Barristan Selmy stands at the king's side. Gregor Clegane is the largest man Jon has ever seen. The description he has heard all his life, the mountain that rides, nearly 8 feet of armored mass, hands big enough to close around a man's helmet and treat it like a problem to be solved, is not adequate preparation for the reality. He carries a sword that most men could not lift from the ground with 2 hands. He walks to his position with the complete indifference of a creature that has never had reason to be afraid of another creature in the room. Oberyn Martell enters the yard with a spear and light armor, and the particular quality of stillness that belongs to people who are very fast and have learned to save speed for the moment it is needed. He has been here for 15 years in the only meaningful sense. Every year since the morning Elia's name became past tense has led him to this sand. He does not need a confession from Gregor Clegane. He does not need Clegane to say it. He knows. The king's court knows. Every person in this gallery knows. The confession happened 15 years ago. It was just made in the language of walls and floors instead of words. What he needs today is something much simpler. The signal is given. Gregor moves the way very large things move, with a momentum that is not speed but that builds into something indistinguishable from it. He swings the greatsword in an arc, designed to take a piece of the world with it regardless of what is in the way. Oberyn is not in the way. He moves left, and the sword finds nothing but air and the sand beneath. His spear traces a line across Clegane's upper arm. First contact, shallow, a statement about reach. Gregor does not react to the cut. Oberyn does not expect him to. The next 2 minutes are the same argument from both sides. The mountain swings with power sufficient to end the matter in a single contact. Oberyn moves with the specific economy of someone who has spent 40 years with a spear and knows that it is not about strength, but about lines, about controlling the line between your weapon and the other man's body. He keeps moving. He keeps the distance wrong for the sword and right for the spear. He draws 2 more cuts, the outer thigh, the back of the sword arm, and takes nothing in return except a blow to his shoulder from the flat of the blade that would have driven a lighter man off his feet. In canon, the fight's end comes from hubris. In a prison yard, with a single prisoner and a single question left unanswered, the temptation to stand over a falling man and demand he say what everyone already knows is human and understandable. The formal proceeding answered the question before the first blow was struck. Oberyn has no confession to demand. He has a judgment to execute. The end comes when Gregor overreaches. It is not a mistake in the usual sense. It is the inevitable result of fighting with a body that large against a man who will not stand still. He commits to a forward push, trying to close the distance and pin Oberyn against the yard wall, and in the moment of commitment Oberyn goes left again and drives the spear under the arm, through the gap in the armor, into the space below the shoulder. Deep. He has been here before, in practice. He knows where this line goes. He steps back and takes the spear out, and moves away. Gregor Clegane falls to his knees. Not immediately. The machinery of him runs for a few seconds more, on the momentum it has built up over decades. But the spear was poisoned, as Oberyn's spears have always been poisoned, and the poison does the final work that the blow began. And the mountain that rode over Elia Martell and her children goes down in the sand and does not rise. The yard is very quiet. Oberyn looks at the body for a moment, then he looks at the gallery. At Robert on his chair, at Jon standing in the stark contingent with grey eyes and a straight back. He bows to the king correctly and walks back to the edge of the yard. Word reaches Tywin Lannister at Casterly Rock 2 days later. He reads the report. He asks no questions. He informs Cersei through a brief letter that House Lannister will be withdrawing its extended court presence for the foreseeable future to attend to business at the Rock. He does not explain further. He is not broken. Tywin Lannister is incapable of breaking in any sense that would satisfy someone who wanted to see it. But he has been checked in a way that is visible from every castle in the Seven Kingdoms, and the instrument of his most brutally effective power is dead in a King's Landing yard, and this will require considerable time and thought to address. He withdraws. For now, that is what it means to lose. Robert settles Viserys's fate in a private session with Jon Arryn, Ned, and Barristan. Not death that makes a martyr, and martyrs require additional wars. Not freedom to the free cities that makes a rallying point, and rallying points also require additional wars. He is stripped of the royal style and titles he has been using without acknowledgement for 15 years. He is sent north, under stark escort, to a remote holding in the northern hills beyond the Neck. Not the Wall. The Wall is an honourable posting for men who have chosen a purpose larger than themselves, and this is not that. It is simply a cold place where a man can be alive and entirely irrelevant, under the wardenship of a lord who will ensure he stays there. He is, at last, not a king or a threat or a political problem. He is a man in the cold. Ned receives this assignment with the acceptance of a man who has been receiving difficult assignments from Robert Baratheon since they were 18 years old, and says nothing further about it. The formal court session is held 1 week before the new year of 299 AC. The great hall of the Red Keep is full. Every lord who can reach the city in time has found reason to attend, and the ones who cannot are represented by their ravens, which have been arriving every day since the announcement. Robert sits on the ironed throne. Jon Arryn stands to his right. Barristan Selmy at the door. Howland Reed is brought from Greywater Watch. He is small and quiet and has the look of a man who has been keeping something heavy for a long time and has arrived at the moment of setting it down. He gives his testimony without notes. The Tower of Joy, the fight with the King's Guard, the birth, the septon named Maynard, the words spoken. He says them in a steady voice to the assembled court. He says, "I was there, I saw it." Jon stands in front of the throne. He is 15, dark-haired, grey-eyed, wearing a stark surcoat, because it is what he owns. He looks at the assembled lords of the realm and feels the specific weight of a room full of people who have been told something true and are deciding what to do with it. He speaks the formal words of acknowledgement that Jon, ward of Ned Stark, Lord of Winterfell, is hereby confirmed as the legitimate son of Rhaegar Targaryen, 12th king of the 7 kingdoms of the Targaryen dynasty. He reads the birth name Aegon, 6th of his name. It goes out into the quiet hall and sits in the air, and the assembled lords absorb it. Jon is asked after by Jon Arryn in the anteroom, a quiet procedural question, properly asked, whether he intends to take the name Aegon for the purposes of formal address. He considers it. He has known this question was coming since Ned told him the truth in the stables 6 years ago. He has thought about it many times in the shape it was going to take. The name that means his father's dynasty, his blood, the 3-headed dragon, and the history he carries. He thinks about it now, with the sound of the hall behind him, and the name still sitting somewhere in the middle distance. "I was raised Jon," he says. "I will remain Jon." The acknowledgement stands. The betrothal stands. "The name I keep is the one that carries the work that was done to keep me alive. Long enough to be standing here," he looks at Ned, who is 3 feet away, and looking at the floor, which is how Ned looks at things that have moved him. Jon serves. Jon Arryn nods, writes it down, and moves to the next item of business. Outside in the corridor, Ned Stark stands against the wall for a moment by himself. The sound from the hall is distant and official and has nothing to do with the specific weight of what he is carrying, which is 15 years of a secret that is no longer a secret, and the knowledge that the thing he promised at the end of a sword fight in Dawn has been, imperfectly but truly. The great sept of Baelor has seen a great deal in its years on the hill above King's Landing. Coronations, funerals, the kind of ceremonies that a kingdom performs when it needs the world to see that something is real. It is built for the specific purpose of making things official in the largest possible sense. The high dome, catching the morning light and sending it down through colored glass in shafts that fall on stone floors and assembled lords, and the general accumulated weight of history that collects in very old buildings. On this morning in 299 AC, the floor of the sept holds more lords than it has held at any single event in Robert Baratheon's reign. They have come from every corner of the 7 kingdoms, some because they wanted to, and some because Robert sent ravens that made not wanting to inadvisable. They stand in their house colours, along the walls, and in the galleries above, Tullys and Tyrells and Arryns and Freys and dozens of minor lords whose banners fill the side passages with colour. And there, along the central nave, Baratheon stag banners alternating with something that has not hung in the great hall of this building in 16 years. The 3-headed red dragon on black, the Targaryen sigil. It has been a symbol of a dead dynasty and a political problem for as long as most of the people in this room can remember. Today it hangs in the sept of Baelor alongside the crowned stag, and nobody who looks at it pretends it is not significant. Jon stands at the foot of the sept's main aisle and waits for the ceremony to begin. He is 16 years old, dark-haired, grey-eyed, in formal dress that is mostly stark, in its cut and colour, with a single piece of Targaryen acknowledgement at his collar, a small medallion bearing the three-headed dragon given to him by Robert. With less ceremony than the gesture probably deserved, the way Robert gives most things. He looks at the assembled lords of the realm, looking back at him, and feels the particular quality of attention that comes from a room full of people who have spent years forming opinions about you and have now arrived at the morning when they update them. He stands straight. It is what he knows how to do. Daenerys comes down the aisle from the sept's eastern door with 2 attendants and the High Septon behind her. She is 15, silver-gold hair arranged formally, violet eyes steady on the distance ahead of her. She has been preparing for some version of this day since she was 5 years old, and a captain read a decree in a room where her mother had just died. She walks without hesitation. She takes her place beside Jon at the altar and looks at the High Septon, and does not look at the gallery, where she knows her brother's absence is a specific shape that the people who knew him will notice. The ceremony is not a wedding. It is a betrothal, the formal and binding public version of an arrangement that has existed on paper for 15 years. The High Septon speaks the words that make it real in the eyes of the faith, the acknowledgement of Jon's lawful bloodline, the consent of both parties, the king's authority, and the witness's record. Jon speaks his part in the direct way he speaks everything. Daenerys speaks hers with the precision of someone who has been rehearsing the words long enough that they have become her own, rather than a script. When the High Septon reads Doran Martell's letter, the sept goes entirely quiet. The letter is brief, as Doran Martell's letters tend to be. It acknowledges the betrothal between Jon, legitimized son of Rhaegar Targaryen, and the Lady Daenerys Targaryen. It extends Dorne's formal recognition of Jon's claim. It expresses House Martell's satisfaction that the blood of Rhaegar Targaryen continues in the realm under terms that honor the dead and protect the living. It is signed in Doran's hand, sealed with the sun and spear, and it is read aloud in a room full of lords who understand exactly what has just been accomplished. What 15 years of careful construction and 2 visits from the Red Viper and 1 formal combat and 16 years of a secret kept by a northern lord have finally produced. The Targaryen question is answered, not by swords, by this. In the northern gallery, Robb Stark watches his brother stand at the altar of the great sept of Baelor and tries to find the feeling that fits the moment. He is 16 years old, the same age as Jon, born in the same year within a few months of each other, raised in the same yard, beaten by the same yardmaster, fed at the same table for as long as he can remember. He is wearing his Stark surcoat, the grey direwolf on white, the sigil of everything Ned built for him, and everything Winterfell is Jon below has the red dragon at his collar. It is not a division. Robb does not feel it as a loss. Exactly. It is more like watching someone you have walked beside all your life reach a fork in the road that only one of you is going to take, and understanding that the fork was always there, and neither of you put it there, and you are both going to be fine on your respective roads. He watches Jon stand straight and composed in front of the assembled lords of the realm, and he thinks, yes, that is the right person for that place. And below that thought, quieter, I am glad it is him. And below that, quietest, I will miss him on the road he is not on. He straightens in his gallery seat and watches the rest of the ceremony with the expression of someone who is proud of someone else, which is one of the most honest expressions a human face can make. Beside Ned, a few rows below the gallery, Catelyn Stark watches the same ceremony with different eyes. She has never warmed to Jon. She has been honest with herself about this for 16 years, in the private accounting she keeps that nobody else reads. It was never hatred, that was always the wrong word, an easier word than the right one. The right one is, she was afraid of what he represented for Robb, for the succession, for the thing she has spent her adult life building in the north. The fear never entirely went away. But she can see what is happening in the sept below her, and she can see what it cost to build it. She can see Ned standing very still beside her, and she knows the shape of this man well enough after 16 years to read the specific quality of his stillness right now, the way he is holding something that is almost relief, but not quite, because relief is what you feel when something you feared did not happen. And this is something he hoped for that did. She reaches over and takes his hand. She does not say anything. Ned looks straight ahead, and his hand closes around hers, and they stand that way through the end of the ceremony. Afterward, when the lords have begun to move, and the sept is filling with the sound of voices and the business of congratulations, Robert finds Ned in the anteroom off the east transept. It is a small room with one window and a stone bench, and no one else is in it because Robert did not want anyone else in it, and he has the authority to arrange for that. He has a cup of wine. He does not offer Ned one, because he knows Ned will not drink it when there is something serious to say, and Robert knows there is. He looks at Ned for a while. Then he asks, "Is this what you promised her?" He has not talked about Lyanna with Robert since the morning in this city 16 years ago, when he laid an infant on a table and said her name. He considers the question now, with the seriousness it deserves. "I promised her the boy would be safe," he says, "and that he would have a future worth having." He turns and looks through the half-open door, into the nave where Jon is standing with Daenerys in the candlelight, accepting the approach of lords who want to say something, standing beside her the way he stands beside everything, steady, direct, without wasted performance. Ned watches them for a moment. "It is close enough," he says. Robert looks at the same scene, through the same door. He drinks his wine. He does not say anything further, which is how Robert Baratheon closes conversations that have reached the point where more words would only be less true. In a corridor off the sept's west transept, after the formal portion of the day has concluded and the attendants have found other rooms to be in, Jon and Daenerys stand for a moment alone in the quiet. The sounds of the sept are distant, and the corridor is cool, and they are just two people at the end of a day that has been a long time arriving. Daenerys says, "I don't know how to do this." Jon thinks about everything that makes her say it, the volcanic island, the years without Darry, Stannis' garrison, the map she drew from memory of the place she lived as a captive, the brother who just became a man in the cold somewhere north of the neck, the silver-gold hair and violet eyes that have marked her as a Targaryen in every room she has ever been in for 15 years. He thinks about all the things he does not know how to do either, which are numerous and include most of what comes next. "Neither do I," he says, "but I know how to start." He offers his hand the way a Stark offers anything, directly, without ceremony, without making it more than it is. She looks at it for a moment, then she takes it. 16 years ago, in a city still smelling of smoke, a young lord laid an infant on a table and told a grieving king the truth. The war that began at a tournament at Harrenhal in 281 AC, when a silver-haired prince set a crown of winter roses on a northern girl's head and changed the course of everything, ended here, not with swords, not with dragonfire, not with the kind of conclusion that fills a battlefield and a history book. It ended with two people standing in a corridor holding hands, choosing what comes next. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the 7 kingdoms and beyond, then please like,